Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Ivy English. I'm Karen.
And I'm Chris Gorski.
Today is August 26th, and we're about to hear part 2 of this really kind of unusual but strangely fascinating article entitled Combs Through the Ages.
That's right. So much of history is about, think about this really powerful warlord or leader that killed a bunch of people and took control. But in fact, I'm done learning about war. I'm done learning about these strong men. I'm done talking about them. I love the minutia of history now. That is the history. I don't even know when it happened, but just one day I said, you know what, strongman history? I'm tired of you.
I've had enough of you.
That's right. And where did the comb come from? Why do we use combs? Why do we have so many kinds of combs? That had to be invented, developed, that had to be shared and passed throughout all over the world. You could find combs all throughout history. Actually, I want to know that story.
That's great. I actually have come to a similar place, ended up in a similar place, but it started several years ago when the stuff kind of hit the fan. And the news every day was so maddening and depressing. It was so awful. I just could not read very much of it. I would skim through the headlines, the story titles. That's all I could take. So I'm just not going to let world news drag me down.
Yeah,
I have a life to live. I need to be productive. So I also love stuff like this.
Yeah, I'm done with your ego, Mr. Strongman. I'm interested in where combs came from. And by the way, while we're talking about this, I'm going to plant my flag.
Yeah.
Do you know what the best comb is?
No.
You remember like the greaser switchback combs?
I remember
like
those.
You're going to do a switchblade and you're going to like pull it and smooth your hair back?
Yeah.
That's the best comb.
Oh, really? Did you have one of those?
Yes. In fact, yesterday we talked about that I haven't combed my hair in 25 years probably. That's because I don't have a switchblade comb. When I was a little boy, I had a downstairs neighbor. He would take care of us. His name was Al. And when I was a kid, he might have been 100 years old as far as I knew. No. Thinking back, he was probably maybe in his 30s or 40s. And his heyday was
100 years old.
His heyday was like in like the 50s. Like he was like the white t-shirt, blue jeans kind of rebel without a cause look.
Slicked back
and
hair.
And he would slick the hair. And he had a switchback comb. And I wanted to be just like little Al. I wanted to be Al, and I would wear the t-shirt and the jeans. And he got me a comb, and I didn't even have a hairstyle appropriate, but I just wanted to do that.
You wanted to be like him.
I wanted to be Al. He was just a nice guy that would take care of us and watch cartoons with us. And I loved Al, and I loved his comb. And that's the only comb I've ever wanted to use in my life.
It sounds like the Fonz.
Yeah, that's exactly right. He's basically the Fonz with the mustache.
All right. If you want to know what the Fonz is, it is just the definite article, the, and then capital F-O-N-Z, the Fonz. It's Henry Winkler.
Henry Winkler, yeah.
He starred in a series called Happy Days. And then he played this really cool guy who had a solution to every problem. And he was just the epitome of cool.
That's exactly right. If you ask a foreigner like to define a person cool, they will probably describe the Fonz. And in real life, Henry Winkler, the actor who played the Fonz, he's used that he's used his power for good. He could have used it to be evil, and instead he's like the most nicest, sincere celebrity. He understands his role in history as the Fonz, and he'll even throw you an A.
Yeah.
Just what a wonderful thing.
But if you're just chatting with him, he sounds like an ordinary, I wouldn't say Midwesterner, maybe New Yorker. I don't know where he's from. But he just is really ordinary if he's just chatting with you. It was totally a role that he created and then kind of acted out his whole life.
And think of this little tangent that we've got on, all because of this switchblade comb and what it means to be cool. We don't think of it this way, but hair, politics, sexuality, nurture, all focused through the hair, and we don't even think about it this way. And this is why I'm so sick of strongmen. There's so much more interesting things to talk about.
Boy, you're telling me. I want to mention a couple words that just came up. One of them is slicked back. Slicked back. S-L-I-C-K, which means slippery. Add an E-D. It's a verb here. Slicked back. That means that your hair has you put some grease on it, a hairdressing, and then you comb it back. So you've got this kind of bubble in front and your hair is combed backwards. That's slicked back hair. That's from the 1950s, early 60s, and then it was out of fashion.
Today you would call it oily head.
Greasy.
Think of the Chinese, oil head. Though that's what it is.
Yeah, greasy hair. Now we think it's gross. We want
it's
hair.
It's cool today. It's cool today. There's a lot of guys at this age, but it's different than the way you might be thinking of it.
Yeah.
But that look is back with a lot of men my age and slightly younger. We call it oil head. Think of the Chinese there.
I don't like oily hair. And the other word here was epitome, E-P-I-T-O-M-E. It's a fancy word from Greek. Epitome is the most representative example you can think of. So if you want to represent what is cool in America, go look at Henry Winkler, this role he played in the series Happy Days. He was the epitome of cool. So that's a good word. It's definitely a good GRE word. Okay, let's continue with part 2 of our article. Our title again was Combs Through the Ages. Today, there are countless types of combs and brushes. Here are a few of the most common styles that you might be familiar with.
Wide-toothed wooden comb. This comb is made of wood and features only a handful of teeth. The teeth are large in comparison to those of other combs. This type of comb is said to be good for detangling wet hair or knotted locks. It can even be used to comb conditioner through your hair in the shower. The wood is also healthier for your hair. Combs made from plastic or metal can create static, while the wooden material of this type of comb is gentler on your hair.
Tailcomb. The special feature of this comb is the handle. This fine-toothed plastic comb has a handle that tapers off into a pointed end. This point can be used to section off and part your hair by running it along your scalp. You can use this part of the comb to do more than just make straight parts. It can also help create a fun zigzag part.
Round brush. Round brushes are particularly useful when it comes to styling your hair. One of the most common ones is the round thermal brush. The barrel of this brush heats up when you are drying your hair. This not only helps the hair dry quicker, but also adds volume and waves to your hair. A smaller brush will help you create tight curls, while a large one is better if you prefer loose, flowing waves.
That's right. Let's go back to the beginning. Go over it sentence by sentence. First of all, today there are countless types of combs and brushes. Very straightforward. So there are many, many kinds of combs, but there are even more kinds of brushes. There are really a lot of kinds of brushes, and I have a drawer full of all kinds of brushes. Here are a few of the most common styles that you might be familiar with. So they're talking about not just combs here, but also brushes. And like I said in English, these are two different objects, even though in Chinese they translate into the same word.
Our first section, wide-toothed wooden comb. This comb is made of wood and features only a handful of teeth.
That makes me think of a guy who's lost some teeth.
You're going on a blind date and your friend describes him. Hey, he's got a handful of teeth. It's a feature.
Not a bug. Okay, so anyway, the first kind, it's a wide-toothed wooden comb. That means that the points of the comb are set further apart. So if you have very kinky or curly hair, it's better to use a comb like this. Or if you comb your hair when it's wet, which you really shouldn't do because it stretches your hair and can break your hair. So this is the first kind of comb we're talking about. The points are set pretty far apart. There are not many teeth, and it's used so that you don't get stuck in a tangle.
The teeth are large in comparison to those of other combs, which it's kind of just what you said. This type of comb is said to be good for detangling wet hair or knotted locks.
And that's also what I just said. So if you have hair with a lot of snarls, we mentioned it before, but we need it again now, S-N-A-R-L. And it's often plural because there's not usually just one knot in your hair. That means your hair is in knots. It's in snarls. You put a comb through it to separate the strands so you can comb it smoothly. Snarl has another meaning. And if you are walking by a dog and it snarls at you, you better be ready with your umbrella.
That's right. A snarl is a low warning growl from a dog. It's not
and they
a
show
full
their
bark.
teeth.
That's right. You're going to see its teeth. It's a good word. That's a good word. A nice connection here.
That's right. So you don't have many teeth, and they're large in comparison to other combs. So detangling wet hair, that's the problem. Like I mentioned, you have to sort of brush your hair a little bit when it's wet, but it's not good to force a comb through your hair when it's wet. You will really damage your hair.
Tangle is a really nice word, and you brought it up yesterday.
Yep.
And tangle is Scandinavian, and that means to disarrange something. So you take something neat and orderly and kind of mess it all up, and that's what to tangle means.
That's right. And if you detangle, that means that you are straightening things out. You are separating them. One way to make it easier to comb or brush your hair after washing it is to use conditioner. Conditioner, actually, it makes your hair strands stronger and easier to separate, and they're a little slipperier.
This is such a woman thing. I was just thinking, I don't use combs, I don't use brushes. I can't think of the last time I used conditioner. Like men absolutely can use the same soap on their face, their butt, their hair, their armpits. It's all one soap. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. We'll only ever, if you're a single man, I guarantee you, most single men do not have multiple kinds of soap. They basically got one big bottle of soap that they use. Maybe you disagree, but I can't think of any guys that have like 4 or 5 kinds of soap. We only have that in my house because of my wife.
Actually, some guys do.
Some guys do, and that is true, and that is fine.
And they even use makeup.
That's right. But I would say probably if you're a more meat and potatoes, average Joe kind of guy, the same soap that goes on your butt is the same soap on your face and your hair and your armpits.
If it is gentle soap, it's no problem. If you have really dry hair, you use regular soap, it will get really dry. So it does depend.
While we're looking at the word knotted, we should bring up that we don't say that K. That KN died out by 1750, but before that, you used to say knot, knee, knife.
That's right.
And yesterday you talked about the MB. And that MB, of course, we don't say that B sound. Comb is wrong. But there are some words where that B still does kind of come out, but they're hidden. Most foreigners would say that MB has died out a long time ago.
An example is the word bomb. And I've heard a lot of Taiwanese say bamba.
Bamba is a very common mistake in my classroom.
Mispronunciation. So that B is not pronounced for any of these words that end in MB. As far as I know, in none of them is the B pronounced. However, if you make it into a longer word, from bomb to bombardment, you get the B back because it's followed by a vowel.
And then we have thimble, crumble, ambidextrous. These MBs sometimes do appear, but generally speaking, if you're not sure, don't say that B.
Well, I think you should just learn each one correctly. If it's at the end of a word, then we probably don't pronounce the B. If it's got some stuff after it, we might. Okay?
Let's continue. It can even be used to comb conditioner through your hair in the shower.
Okay, that's something that you can either do or not do. You can also just massage it in with your fingers, which is what all my hairdressers do. But you can use a comb if you want.
The wood is also healthier for your hair. Combs made from plastic or metal can create static, while the wooden material of this type of comb is gentler on your hair.
And this is true because wood actually absorbs liquids better, certainly than plastic does not really. So wood is probably better for your hair, but I think most people just don't use wood combs. And it says that a problem with a plastic or metal comb, and I don't think many people use metal combs either, is that you can get static. However, it's not usually a problem in Taiwan because it is so humid. In Minnesota, man, you really get static.
You get that shock, right?
And you're going to have to put some kind of a hairdressing in your hair. Otherwise, you're going to have really frizzy hair. It's just, we call it flyaway hair. It's like it's going to fly away like a bird, FLYAWAY, flyaway hair. That's from static electricity. So if you put something, an oil-based dressing in your hair, then it won't be so flyaway. And it says that the wooden material is also gentler on your hair. And that is true because often with plastic, it just somehow, the knots get stuck in the plastic. I agree with that.
The first time I took my wife to Buffalo during the winter when it's so dry, just like Minnesota, I showed her the static electricity like in the dark. I was like, check this out, because I noticed how dry it was. And you can see it. That's right. She's like, wow, I've never seen that because it's so humid here.
It's so humid here. And I know a lot of people really dislike the humidity, but one reason Taiwanese preserve their youth so well is because of the high humidity. It keeps your skin moist.
That's true.
And so there is a very good side to it. The bad side of it is allergies.
Yeah, I can attest to that. I can tell you that's true.
Both my kids had trouble. And when my son moved to Taichung, he was fine because it doesn't rain very often there. So he hardly had problems there. He always had problems in Taipei. All right, next paragraph. Tail comb. The special feature of this comb is the handle. So it's a comb with a tail. We often called it a rat tail. Yeah, because that's the shape of a rat tail. It ends in a point.
The defining feature of the tailcomb to me is that it always said unbreakable. And I looked at that as like a challenge as a kid, and I would just keep bending it.
Yeah,
I was like, how long would it take?
You can definitely break a lot of these things.
But it was like something you had to try to break, to be fair.
That's true. But we did call it a rat tail comb. So normally it's rat tail, not just tail. And its special feature is the handle. And what is it good for? This fine-tooth plastic comb has a handle that tapers off into a pointed end, just like the tail of a rat when it's straight. This point can be used to section off and part your hair by running it along your scalp. So if you want to part your hair on two sides, and if you go to a hairdresser, they say, do you have a part? Where would you like to part your hair? You want to separate two sides of your hair, and you usually want to keep the line straight, and it's kind of hard to do sometimes. So you can use this rat tail to just run a line down your hair, and it's supposed to give you a very clean, straight part, but in fact, in practice, it doesn't always work that well. I have to tell you, I have experience. And you can use this part of the comb to do more than just make straight parts. It can also help create a fun zigzag part. Now, if you have kind of frizzy hair to start out with, it's no fun to make a zigzag part because people just think you did a sloppy job on your hair.
So before we continue to paragraph 3, we have the word scalp in that previous sentence. When you see S-C-A-L, this is a Scandinavian root. It means to cut, and there's a lot of words related to that. Probably most famously, scalp is the skin on your head, but people would cut that off as like punishment or a way to kill you, and that is to scalp.
Especially the American Indians are known for that, Native Americans.
In the hospital, when a doctor creates an incision or they cut you open, they use a scalpel, S-C-A-L-P-E-L. And one of the oldest ways to cut things easily was to use a scallop's shell. And a scallop is a lot like an oyster or a clam. The shell can be very sharp, and that's S-C-A-L-L-O-P.
And it has these rounded ends.
That's right. It was very good for digging and to cut. That's where the word comes from.
And another fun word is zigzag.
Yeah, that is a good one.
That's right, because you have a Chinese word, and I'm going to say one Chinese word. Don't get mad at me. It's zhi. And zhi is a classical Chinese word, but it has the shape of an English or a Latin letter Z. And we don't say that it's Z-shaped. We usually say it's zigzagged. It goes back and forth like a road, a zigzagged road. I just wrote an article about this, by the way.
Interesting.
Yes. Okay. So that's paragraph 3.
And the comb, while we're talking about this, might seem like a kind of insignificant thing. Like, why are we talking about this for 22 minutes? But think of the political meanings of a hairstyle. And this was something I alluded to earlier. So if you think of in the 1970s, an afro.
Okay, I was thinking you're going to talk about Black Americans, and this is a really important topic.
Or think if you see a woman today with extremely short hair, like a buzz cut, very, very short hair. There's often a lot of political ideas tied to them. And we express a lot of political views or who we are as a person through our hairstyles, and that's made possible by these combs. And one thing we don't talk about here is the Afro pick. It's called P-I-K, and it's used to kind of create a lot of volume with people that have traditionally African hair.
If they're wearing their hair natural, they used to call it an afro, and people still call it that. They're less popular now, but they were very popular in the 60s, and frankly, I really like that style.
Yeah.
I like it better than all these chemicals and all of these things, you have to get permanence, you get hair extensions, you do all kinds of things to your hair. I think that hair is beautiful just in its natural state, especially for African American hair. If it's tidy, you get a nice even cut, and you just comb it with a pick. I think it's beautiful. There's another point about this, and Chris just mentioned that it can be political, and there's some news items that have shocked me. And they have said that people are protesting in order to get schools to allow African American children to wear black hair the way they want to. And I thought, who in the world is telling you can't wear your hair the way you want to? Because I also grew up I went to a black church, not a black church, but we were in the black part of town. We had many black people there. I was fascinated by the many, many hairstyles that my friends came to church with, in different kinds of braids and pigtails and cornrows. I mean, everything. I thought it was so beautiful and so fascinating because that's not something we always, some white people do it, but not as often. And then I guess some schools restrict black children from the ways they can style their hair. And I thought, What right do you have?
Yeah, what
Let them
year
do with
is
their
this?
hair what they want. So that was something I found fascinating. I found aggravating. I found it shocking. In recent news, they're only just starting to allow kids to wear hair the way they want. So you can see that if you are a person of color, you will often have to be picked on for things that white people would never be bothered with.
Yeah, I had not even known this was an issue until I was an adult. I went to black schools growing up, and I was like, why is it a problem for their hair to be like this? I had no idea this even existed, and then I learned this is oftentimes maybe an African-American person living in a more a community where there are more white people because schools are so segregated in the U.S., and that's where those issues come from, and it's such a stupid non-issue. It's like, why does this rule even exist? I agree. It's a bizarre thing.
But it is a thing. You should be aware of it. If you go online, you'll find out more information.
All right, round brush. Round brushes are particularly useful when it comes to styling your hair.
And that is really true. I have experience with that because I have curly hair. So when I go to the hairdressers, they take a round brush and they take a hairdryer. There are different ways of doing it. They use a large one to make large waves instead of little curls.
One of the most common ones is the round thermal brush.
So it is actually an electrical appliance. It creates heat, and then there is a round brush around it, and then you can use that instead of taking a hairdryer and a round brush. You have it in one, but actually it's not as efficient. It's better to use a hairdryer and a brush separately.
Therm is a common and useful suffix or prefix. It's THER, and it always means heat. Next, the barrel of this brush heats up when you are drying your hair.
Pretty straightforward.
This not only helps the hair dry quicker, but also adds volume and waves to your hair.
And that depends on the generation and on the fashion. Because in the 60s, do you remember these big bouffant? Yeah, they would do this, and they would use sometimes juice cans to set your hair so that your hair would have these huge waves and it would be very high. And then they'd spray it with a lot of hairspray. That is not done now. Now they mostly use a hairdryer, a handheld hairdryer, or you can use an iron for your hair, or you can actually just wrap your hair before you go to bed. There are many ways of doing it. But in any case, we will be using often these round brushes to get these longer, straighter waves.
And our final sentence today, a smaller brush will help you create tight curls, while a large one is better if you prefer loose, flowing waves.
And that's also pretty straightforward. We've already discussed that. So if it's a very small brush, you're going to get small curls. If it's a large brush, your hair will be straighter with a large wave. Okay, let's jump right into our questions. Number 1, which of the following was used as the design idea behind combs? The answer is
C, human fingers.
Number 2.
Which of the following was not a function of combs in ancient times?
The answer is B, they improved hair quality. You should not brush or comb your hair too much. It is not really good for you. They used to say you should brush your hair at 200 strokes before bed. That was bad advice. It's really hard on your hair. So combs do not necessarily improve your hair quality. Don't brush more than you need to or comb more than you need to. Number 3, according to the passage, why were the Egyptians' combs special? And the answer is
B, the comb's look was the first of its kind.
So it's said they appeared a very long time ago, and in the Egyptian period, they had a new design. That was the first time we saw that.
They look like Afro pigs.
That's right. Okay, number 4, Susan wants to buy a new comb that can make her long hair straight and smooth. She also hopes that the comb won't harm her hair, so the material matters. Based on the Day 2 article, which comb or brush is suitable for her? And we have a picture of A, a round brush, B is a rat tail comb, C is a very fine-tooth comb that's probably good for lice, and then D is a very loose, large-tooth comb, and that is the answer, letter D. And that is all we have time for today. Hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.